June 5th, 1984. A man steps through the ropes for the very first time in his professional career. No years of training, no territory experience, nothing. 13 seconds later, his opponent is down and the match is over. How does someone with almost no wrestling background walk into the most competitive territory in America and immediately become one of the most feared men in the locker room? That is the question every legend who shared a ring with Nikita Koloff has spent decades trying to answer. Before there was a Russian nightmare, there was Nelson Scott Simpson, a kid from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who grew up without a father, started lifting weights in junior high school, and spent his teenage years chasing a career in football. He never made it to the professional level. 2 college injuries ended that path. By 1984, he was preparing for a tryout with the USFL when a phone call changed everything. On the other end of the line was Joe Laurinaitis, his former college teammate, better known to wrestling fans as Road Warrior Animal. Animal told him to come try wrestling. Simpson showed up, shaved his head, and walked into Jim Crockett Promotions with virtually no training. Jim Crockett gave him a new name, a new identity, and exactly one rule. If you trip on the ropes when entering the ring, you will be fired on the spot. Not a coaching note, not a suggestion, a termination condition. From his very first day, the margin for error was 0. To protect him, Crockett booked Nikita exclusively in short squash matches, not to hide weakness, but to build an image before anyone had the chance to find one. The audience never saw him struggle. Every time they saw him, he was already winning. The 1980s had no shortage of evil foreign heels. Promoters across America built entire programs around villainous characters from hostile nations. Most of them were large, slow, and unconvincing. Audiences booed them because they were told to, not because they genuinely believed the threat was real. Nikita Koloff was different from the moment he walked through the curtain. One reviewer who watched his early work put it this way: Nikita Koloff was a new kind of evil foreign heel when he debuted. Up until that time, the majority of them were big, bulky wrestlers that didn't look physically intimidating, but Nikita looked like a destroyer. He had the muscles and the look a decade before Goldberg. Nikita Koloff looked like he could, and probably would, destroy the American hero. That comparison to Goldberg is not casual. It describes a specific type of physical presence, a body built not for athletics, but for destruction. 275 pounds of muscle developed through years of dedicated weight training, sitting on a 6'2" frame, with a shaved head and a black singlet. His character was described in one place simply as wrestling's equivalent of the Drago character in Rocky IV: big, strong, scary, and Russian. That reference matters. Ivan Drago was not a villain audiences laughed at. He was a villain audiences genuinely feared. When Nikita stood across the ring from an opponent, the physical imbalance was not a storyline. It was visible to everyone in the building. There is a difference between a wrestler who chooses to be stiff and one who simply cannot help it. The first is a decision. The second is something far more unsettling. Magnum TA, who feuded with Nikita longer and more intensely than almost anyone, said it plainly in a shoot interview. Nikita was so jacked up that he was stiff without even trying to be. That one sentence explains something that television cameras could never fully capture. When a 275-pound man with a football background makes contact, the force is real, regardless of intention. Nikita was not working stiff to send a message. He was working stiff because his body did not know how to do otherwise. Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express learned this the hard way in the early days of their feud. Morton recalled the experience years later. They'd go to lock up and Nikita would headbutt him because he didn't know that he was supposed to keep his head back for the lockup. After 2 or 3 times, Ricky threw his elbow into Nikita and busted his eyebrow. Read that again. Morton had to physically strike Nikita just to teach him basic ring safety. The headbutts were not malicious. Nikita genuinely did not know, and that is precisely what made him dangerous. His default setting caused damage before he even understood the rules. There is a lesser-known story from one of his early squash matches against a wrestler named Vernon Deaton. Nikita ran in, hit the Russian sickle immediately, and Deaton went down. Nikita then tried to lift him up, and Deaton simply collapsed again, unable to stand. Nikita placed a knee on his chest, pointed down, and said, "USA, right here." He had finished the match before he realized it was over. Most wrestlers play a character inside the ring and drop it the moment they walk through the curtain. Nikita Koloff did the opposite. He learned conversational Russian and used it in public. He refused to speak English in the locker room. He stayed in character at restaurants, in airports, in gyms, anywhere there was a possibility of being recognized. As one account described it, he played the character so convincingly by keeping kayfabe in public, even learning Russian phrases to use in public and promos, that he became Nikita almost instantly and overnight. This was not method acting for its own sake. It was a calculated decision rooted in the reality of the era. In 1984, the Cold War was not a history lesson. It was a daily anxiety for ordinary Americans. The Soviet Union represented a genuine and specific fear. Nuclear conflict was a conversation people had at dinner tables. When Nikita walked into an arena billed from Moscow, he was not just a wrestling villain. He was a physical embodiment of what millions of Americans were already afraid of. The clearest proof of how completely this worked came at the Great American Bash in 1985. During his match against Ric Flair, a fan from the crowd climbed through the ropes and physically attacked Nikita. Not a planted performer, an actual member of the audience who could no longer separate the character from the threat. Nikita later said that match was his favorite of his entire career, not because he won, but because that moment proved the character was real to the people watching. When a paying customer is willing to climb into a professional wrestling ring to confront you, the work is done. Every dominant wrestler needs a finishing move that feels inevitable, something that once set in motion, the audience believes cannot be stopped. For Nikita Koloff, that weapon was the Russian sickle. It was not a technically complex maneuver, the mechanics were straightforward. A running lariat where Nikita swung his right arm in a sickle-like arc, targeting the opponent's neck and jaw. What made it devastating was described this way: a charging lariat where he swung his right arm in a sickle-like arc to strike the opponent's neck and jaw, generating concussive impact capable of ending matches. The word concussive is doing important work in that sentence. This was not a move designed to look painful. It was a move that actually transferred force. Beyond the sickle, Nikita's specialty was the Russian chain match, a brutal stipulation using chains thicker than those in standard chain matches, often combined with steel cage environments and lights out rules. His 1985 feud with the Road Warriors was built almost entirely around these conditions, and one of their encounters was voted Match of the Year runner-up by Pro Wrestling Illustrated readers. But there was a structural secret behind all of this. Barry Darsow, who wrestled alongside Nikita as Crusher Khrushchev, revealed it through accounts from that period. Nikita Koloff was booked to not sell, so Darsow played an important role in their trio. Darsow absorbed the punishment, Nikita absorbed nothing. Every time audiences watched Nikita compete, they were watching a man who had been deliberately protected from ever appearing vulnerable. The monster was partly constructed, but the construction was so complete that it made no difference. If there is one feud that defined what Nikita Koloff was capable of, it was his series against Magnum TA in 1986. Not because of the matches alone, but because of everything that surrounded them. The two men were constructed as opposites. Magnum was young, charismatic, and positioned as the future of the NWA, the man being groomed to eventually take the World Heavyweight Championship from Ric Flair. Nikita was the immovable Soviet machine standing directly in his path. The tension between them felt genuine because both men understood what was at stake. Their rivalry culminated in a best-of-7 series for the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. 3 wins each, 1 no contest, then a deciding 8th match to settle it. Nikita won. Magnum TA reflected on that period years later with striking honesty. His series of matches with Nikita Koloff in 1986 was the pinnacle of his career as it elevated both men to a higher level. That is a significant admission from a man who was one of the most naturally gifted performers of his generation. He was not saying Nikita carried him. He was saying that the collision of 2 credible forces produced something neither could have reached alone. The plan after that series was for Magnum to defeat Ric Flair for the NWA World Championship at Starrcade in 1986, followed by a long program against Nikita through the following year. Dusty Rhodes, who was booking at the time, had not yet decided whether Nikita would eventually win the title during that feud. In October of 1986, Magnum TA lost control of his car on a rain-soaked road in Charlotte and struck a telephone pole. His fourth and fifth cervical vertebrae were severely damaged. His career ended that night. A photograph published in Wrestling 87 magazine showed Nikita with a single caption beside him: "I cry for Magnum TA." The man who defeated him was also the man who mourned him most publicly. When Magnum TA's career ended, Dusty Rhodes needed to restructure the entire landscape of the NWA. The man who was supposed to carry the company into the next chapter was gone. Rhodes made a decision that nobody saw coming. He turned Nikita Koloff into a babyface. The moment happened on October 24th, 1986 in Charlotte, North Carolina. Rhodes needed a partner for a cage match against Ole Anderson and JJ Dillon. When Nikita's music hit and he stepped into the cage to stand beside Dusty, the building did not know how to react at first. And then it erupted. Nikita stated that despite his bitter rivalry with Magnum TA, Magnum had earned his respect, and that he would now work to earn the respect of the American people. What followed was one of the most dominant babyface runs in NWA history. Nikita and Dusty, branded as the Superpowers, went to war with the Four Horsemen throughout 1987. That feud was voted Feud of the Year by Pro Wrestling Illustrated. One observer captured the transformation precisely. When Nikita turned face, the Nightmare became more of a dream than fans ever thought he could. Another reviewer noted something equally telling. He was so over as a heel, they made him a babyface. Great in ring charisma and crowd connection. That second observation carries real weight. Nikita Koloff was so convincingly threatening as a villain that the most logical next step was to put that same threatening presence on the side of the audience. The fear did not disappear, it simply changed direction. By 1992, Nikita Koloff had been one of the most physically imposing figures in professional wrestling for nearly a decade. He had survived feuds with Ric Flair, the Four Horsemen, the Road Warriors, and Magnum TA. He had absorbed punishment across steel cages, Russian chain matches, and War Games environments. What ended his career was a single clothesline. At Halloween Havoc in 1992, Big Van Vader, himself one of the most legitimately dangerous men in the business at that time, delivered a stiff clothesline directly to Nikita's head. The impact herniated a disc in his neck. He never competed again. There is an uncomfortable symmetry in that ending. The Russian sickle, Nikita's own finishing move, a running strike to the neck and jaw, had ended hundreds of matches across 8 years of competition. At Halloween Havoc, that same type of blow ended him. The man who was built to be unstoppable was stopped by the one thing he had spent his entire career delivering to others. Nikita Koloff never wrestled a single match for WWE. He built everything he became inside Jim Crockett Promotions and the NWA, in a territory that no longer exists, during an era that television has mostly forgotten, and yet the blueprint he established did not disappear. When Goldberg arrived in WCW in 1997, bald, bearded, destroying opponents in under a minute, refusing to sell, finishing matches with a single devastating strike, observers immediately drew the comparison. The debt was visible. Nikita himself understood what he had built and why he chose to protect it. When Barry Darsow left for WWE and invited him to come along, Nikita declined. The amount of time and effort I put into getting my own character, Nikita Koloff, over, it would really just be taking away from all that hard work and labor. That decision cost him mainstream exposure. It also preserved something rare, a career built entirely on one identity, committed to completely. From the first 13-second match to the final bell in 1992, the Russian Nightmare was never real, but the fear was.